Welcome to the Captain's Log issue 138. In this space, this weekly reflection, I try to dive deeper into an aspect of the social age. And this week's been quite a reflective week for me. I've been writing about myself, rather oddly. The first chapter of the doctoral work I'm doing is autoethnographic, essentially to talk about where you have come from, your influences, what has shaped you into your work today, and then finally looking forward. So I've been doing that using some maps, thinking about the process of creating maps and what maps represent. I suppose day to day, when we use Google Maps or when we try to navigate our way to a destination, we use a map as a truth. We use a map because we believe it will give us an answer. It will allow us to be found. But of course, the flip side is also true. It's almost as if turning the map over would give us our way to be lost. Maps don't have to represent a grounded truth. They can, of course, represent a belief. We can map things as a matter of fact. We can map them as a matter of belief. We can create a map of ideas. We can draw a map of the future. A map really just allows us to identify landmarks, the interrelationship between them, the way they're juxtaposed upon each other within the landscape, and a sketch or an idea of where the paths and boundaries may lie. So I've been diving into this, as I say, deeper this week, writing about this, because when I think about my own work, I think it takes place typically at the boundaries. In fact, I could argue that the social age puts a greater emphasis on boundaries, not just the boundary between formal and social systems, but the boundaries between communities, of which, of course, we inhabit many, and the boundaries between systems of power. So to understand boundaries, which, of course, are fluid and contextual, is to create a map, and sometimes to share a map. To be effective, to build influence can be about understanding those boundaries and the mechanisms by which they shift. To be an explorer can therefore be to take yourself to the boundary and to work out, can you knock it over? Can you climb over it? Can you simply shout stories over the top of it? So the process of map making, of cartography, is an interesting one because you may start out to decide what type of map am I making? A map of my certainty, a map of my curiosity. Will landmarks look the same over time, or would they change over time? Do some things fall off the map? Of course, medieval map makers would include dragons, and you'll see in my own maps of the social age, which I've drawn most years since about 2014, I often include the dragons, here be dragons, which is a way of saying, I've got no idea what's going on here. Those early map makers didn't always travel to where they were making the map, because that could be too much effort, it could be too difficult at a time when transportation technology was one of the limiting factors. So instead, they would do the next most reliable thing, which is ask somebody whose brother's aunt had been to that place. So those maps would be maps of stories and beliefs. I saw someone who saw someone who saw someone who saw the thing, and it gets carried back to us. So those maps carry optimism and hope and a belief in their value. I find that the process of mapping can be interesting because it forces us to think about the landmarks. It forces us to decide, what will we be able to see if we stand here? In my work on the Learning Science book this week, I've been thinking about that quite a lot. So the historic markers that we would see in the landscape of learning, of leadership, of culture, the formal structures of organizations, often held in boundaries between infrastructure we own and infrastructure we don't own, between spaces we control and spaces we don't control, between hierarchy and anarchy. Those markers, those landmarks may have changed. Possibly if we stand and look around today, what we will see instead is structures of story and structures of belief, structures of society and community. We may simply see that between two maps, the older map and the newer one, we have less hard infrastructure and more story and belief. And if that were true, It would indicate that curiosity and storytelling and an understanding of social tribal structures will be important if we're to navigate our way through. So, as you can tell, I've been rambling around landscapes this week. I've been writing a lot this week. I think I've written about 12,000 words. I've been writing about being an explorer. I've been writing about map making. I've been writing about where I came from. And then at the harder end of things, I've been writing in the learning science work about learning engineering and curiosity. So it's been quite a diverse week for me, which is good. At the end of it, I feel different, which I think is worth noting. In the quiet leadership work, I say that we take the first 3 steps of the journey this week. They're the important ones, to take the steps and to share them. It's worth noting that this week, having given myself a permission to dive into ideas that I know I will be immersed in for the next 18 months, I have not felt the need to be found. I've just enjoyed drawing things onto that landscape. In fact, I have been, I'll put a link on the Learning Fragments site to the map I have been drawing. Sometimes just getting lost in a landscape can be the best part of making a map. Well, I hope you've had a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next time.